The Consulting Success podcast is powered by the Clarity Coaching Program. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to find out more and apply.
Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Bob Burg joining us. Bob, welcome.
Thanks, Michael. Great to be with you.
Yeah, so for those who may not be familiar with your work, although I think many certainly will be, Bob, you're a speaker, author, sales trainer. You're also the founder of Burg Communications, Inc. You're probably best known for your book, The Go-Giver, which is the Go-Giver series now. So many books sold well over 1 million copies. You've also been named one of the most influential leaders in the world by the American Management Association. So it's a real pleasure to have you on here on the podcast today, Bob.
Pleasure's mine. The honor is mine too.
I want to get started going back in the day, and maybe there's something that we can extract or kind of pull out of you today that people don't know about. Before you even started speaking and writing the books, what were you doing? Like, take us back to Bob Burg back in the day. How did you spend your days? What were you doing before you got into the world of writing and speaking on the topic of sales and everything else?
I started out in broadcasting, first as a radio sportscaster, then a TV news guy. And then I wasn't really very good at that and graduated into sales and floundered for a few months since I had no idea what I was doing and no training at the company where I was at. And gosh, about 3 months into it or so, I was in a bookstore and saw a couple books on selling, which doesn't seem like a big deal these days, but 40 years ago, that just wasn't something that you knew about. And the books were by Tom Hopkins and Zig Ziglar, two of the real icons in the sales space. They taught me a methodology, a way of doing things, a system, if you will, that would, I personally define a system as the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles, the key being predictability, right? If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, then you know that all you need to do is A and continue to do A and continue to do A, and eventually you'll get the results of B. And so that really gave me a lift. I knew there was not a wheel I needed to invent or reinvent, that it was already out there. And so after a few years of that and eventually working my way up to sales manager of a company, I started sharing with others what was working for me and kind of morphed into a speaking business. And again, I joined National Speakers Association so I could learn the business of speaking. And that's also where I met a couple of people who said, Burg, you really should get your book written. And I said, well, I don't really want to write a book. And they said, well, you should probably do it anyway, because it's going to position you better. It's going to make you more marketable. You're going to get higher fees. You're going to be able to, and they listed off a few reasons, which all made sense. So I wrote a book called Endless Referrals. That was my first book. That was back in the 90s.
All right. So I want to go back to that time when you were actually in radio or in broadcasting. What was it that pulled you to sales from that? Because oftentimes people, they've invested a lot of time and energy and their studies into a specific domain, into a specific industry, and it can be hard to shift to something completely different. So what was it that was going on inside of your own mind? And what kind of was the pull that got you into the whole world of sales?
Well, I really wanted to be a sportscaster, and that's what I started out doing on radio. But as I applied for TV jobs in sports, they just weren't there. And so I got an offer to do news. I thought, okay, well, I'll do news for a while, and eventually I'll get my break and go into sports. But, I got into news, and I wasn't very good at it because I wasn't a journalist. I could be a sportscaster, would have been up my line, but I was a news guy. And I just wasn't really cut out for that. And then what was interesting is I got a chance to do some weekend sports on TV. But after doing the news, the sports just didn't seem that big a deal. And I said, this really isn't what I want to be doing. And so I found a job in sales.
Why sales? Why not go and become something else? Why not get into some other, was there something specific that pulled you over to the world of sales?
No, I really was a way just to make some money at that
Gotcha.
time.
Okay. Makes sense.
It wasn't like I was qualified to be an engineer somewhere. So,
you mentioned your definition of a system is being able to predictably achieve a result. So that by doing A, if you keep doing A, you're going to get to B. I think very often, even when business owners are working on something, when they believe they have a system or they're following even somebody else's system they've read about in a book or seen in a presentation, you get to this point between A and B where you're doing a lot of A, but you're not yet seeing B, right? How do you process that? How do you think about that from a mindset perspective? Were you just always very optimistic, knowing, okay, I'm just going to keep pounding forward and I'm going to get that result? It's going to happen because clearly somebody says that it works for them? Or was there a shift over time, over your career, where that belief or that mindset kind of changed for you? Because I think a lot of people get stuck in that middle and then they don't keep moving forward and they give up too early before reaching B.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I've morphed in my life in that back in my younger days, because I'm 64 now, back in my younger days, I had a lot more of a feeling that I had to be in control of the world and that it was all up to me, and that, which sounds like someone who's confident, but really it was a lack of confidence, right? It was a need to know what was going to happen, which we can't, right? So I think that hurt more than helped me. But I was just so driven to get to where I wanted to be that I kept doing it anyway. But I had all sorts of angst, right, as I was in the process. But as I got older, I started realizing, you know what? All you can control is your actions. Now, you've got to do the best you can with what you can control. I remember a great speaker mentor of mine by the name of Bill Gove used to tell all his proteges, say, you're responsible to people, not for people. And what he really meant is you're responsible to doing the things that you are supposed to do, to be prepared, to give someone the opportunity to know your stuff, to be able to answer the questions, to ask the right questions, to all the things that's your responsibility. Yeah. So you're responsible to people to show up that way, but you're not ultimately responsible for their decisions. And when we approach like that, we actually have a lot more emotional posture. And I define posture in one of two ways. You can say posture is when you care, but not that much, right? So, but we could define it a little more professionally as saying it's a lack of emotional attachment to a specific desire. So what that means is we can prefer something to happen, and that's very healthy to prefer a certain result. But we can't attach ourselves to it, because when we attach ourselves to it, we live in anxiety, we live in fear and frustration and anger if we don't get what we want. But even if we do get what we want, if we're attached, we still have that same fear that something's going to go wrong. We still have that same anxiety that something's going to mess up. We still have it, right? So when we have that kind of emotional posture, that lack of attachment, it allows us to do our job the very, very best we can, but without that stress and anxiety. And what that does is it actually makes us more attractive to our potential customers and clients.
Yeah, I think that's a very powerful distinction. You mentioned the word drive, and I'm wondering, as your career has developed, as you have become more and more successful over time, have you noticed that your drive or kind of level of drive changes? So before you wrote The Go-Giver, here you are years later, over 1 million copies sold. I would imagine financially where you are today is very different than where you were maybe 20 years ago or so. Has your level of drive changed? And if so, how do you kind of think about that? Because you're still creating, you're still doing a lot of stuff. I'm just interested from your perspective. What have you noticed about yourself as the years have gone on?
Yeah, I think with me personally, I'm much more interested in having fun at what I'm doing. And so, like, for example, my business partner, Kathy Tajanel, and I have a Go-Giver online membership community, okay, which I plan to do for the rest of my life because it's so much fun. I just love it. And we love building it. And we love the idea that we can hopefully build it to 1 million monthly active users, all doing business the Go-Giver way with a focus on giving value to others while being open to receive in abundance. And we just think about what it is that can happen with that world, right?
Yeah.
It's fun.
Has that changed? Like, so would you say that focus of today, where it's more on fun, earlier in your career, was the focus more on financials or metrics or some other place?
The financials were a lot more important than they are now, certainly, but I still loved what I did. But I also did a lot of things back then that I didn't like that I had to do in order to have the results I wanted. So, for example, I've never been one that loved travel, right? Well, as a speaker, you're on the road. And if I wanted the speaking engagements, and I love that part. I mean, I feel honored to have been able to do this for 30 plus years. Love the speaking aspect, never loved travel, being on planes, staying in hotels, the whole thing. But you did it because that's what you had to do if you wanted the results you wanted. Now at 64, I'll take on 10, what I call on a plane engagements a year. And usually they need to be direct flights and within this part of the country. Not always, but by and large, unless I really want to do that particular thing. So I do enough so I can keep my hand in it and not be in an ivory tower type of thing. I still feel like I need to be out there and get, but less willing to, I'm not going to be living on the road or any of that
stuff. Yeah. You're done with the road warrior stuff. I got you. Yeah. So let's talk about The Go-Giver for a moment. That book, which really brought your name to a lot more visibility in the marketplace, sold over 1 million copies. What do you think it was about that book that really distinguished it and that made it so successful? Because there are many books on sales. As you said, back in the day, there weren't as many.
Yours is not that there weren't many books on sales, although you were right, there weren't as many. It just wasn't, the whole personal development sales thing wasn't as prevalent. And by the way, I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize, but it just wasn't as prevalent. You didn't really know about it unless you were kind of in that game. Now, I think everybody knows there's a thing like that, even if they're not involved.
So do you think is the concept of the book that really, or is it the way that it was written, kind of being a fable, parable style? Like what really made it so successful?
I think there were a few elements that helped a lot. One was, the parable style is very helpful. It's because it's short, it's easy to read. I had a fantastic co-author by the name of John David Mann, who is really the lead writer and storyteller. I'm a how-to guy, as you can tell from speaking to me for 2 minutes. So John is the person who made that really pop. But then I also think that it was a message that people have kind of wanted to hear for a while. And that is, you can have good intent and really want to help others and do really great things for your marketplace and earn a lot of money. That it's not, well, you can do great things and still, despite doing all those great things, you can still make money. No, this was saying in order to really bring in a sustainably healthy income, okay, and really enjoy what you do, you've got to have a focus on adding value to the lives of others. Now, the reason why I think this really hit is because by and large, that's how most entrepreneurs and salespeople feel, right? As human beings, we all have all sorts of elements of human nature. Some are good, some aren't as good. But one I think is pretty good is that we do have a natural tendency to want to feel as though we're bringing value to the world around us. We want to feel like we're making a difference. We want to be part of something bigger than just ourselves. And as entrepreneurs and salespeople, we tend to do that through our work, our business. And that doesn't mean we can't be involved in other stuff. I'm just saying, but by and large, we bring value to the world through our products and services. And so what this book was basically doing was giving them permission to be who they wanted to be.
While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. So let me ask, kind of consultants have deep knowledge and so much to share inside of them, yet they often hesitate to prolifically kind of put their ideas and content out there. The biggest concern typically being, I'm giving away too much or I'm giving away too much for free. What's your belief, your mindset around just giving prolifically in terms of content and ideas? Because you do a lot of that with your articles, your speaking, your books. How do you kind of think about that?
Yeah. So I think it really needs to be looked at that when you create content, you can't really worry about people taking it and first of all, some people are gonna, and that's not good. I'm not somebody who's gonna say, oh, yo, that's fine. Let them do it. No, if you studied for that wisdom, if you learned it through personal experience, that's yours. And people shouldn't just take it to repackage and use on their own. But the world is the world. But if you're too worried about that, what's going to happen is you're never going to produce anything. You're never going to create anything. And then no one's going to know who you are anyway. And it's the same thing. So no, I think you got to create a lot of content and put it out there because that is the way that people are going to start to know who you are. Now, of course, that kind of content marketing isn't the only kind of marketing. I think we still have to be outbound. I think we have to make the calls. We have to put ourselves in the position to meet the people who our marketer can refer to us and all the other things. But in terms of content creation, when you're creating value through your videos, your articles, and all the different things you're doing, you just got to let that go. The thing about people stealing your stuff. Okay. Now, as far as are you giving them too much information that they won't need you? That's another concern. Yeah, because the more good information you give them, the more they know that if they're really going to take it to that next level, they absolutely need you to work them through it. So yeah, that's something where I wouldn't concern myself with that. And then, there's also, well, how much do you, and I think you and I may have spoken about this before, where you say, well, what if somebody's asking me for advice and counsel and I'm kind of giving them this great information one-on-one. And, my idea is eventually they're going to see, wow, I need to work with this person and pay them to do it. But they don't seem to be getting that. They come to you for another time and it's just not appropriate at this point. Now it's when you need to be charging them and you need to be prepared for that. And you need to have down what you're going to say, and you need to do it tactfully and empathetically and in a way that doesn't embarrass the other person. And you say, it sounds like I'm really enjoying our conversations. It sounds as though you're getting some really good value from this. And the person says, oh, yeah, this is great. Say, well, this is what I do. I'm actually a consultant. And if you'd like to have a professional ongoing relationship with me, I'd be absolutely honored to. Is that what you would like to do? And the person says, well, yeah, that would be great. Well, here's how we go about it. Boom. And so being a go-giver does not in any way mean that you're anybody's doormat or a martyr or self-sacrificial. It just simply means that you understand that when your focus is on providing immense value to others, that's when you actually create that benevolent context for your success.
Yeah. So clearly you are very prolific, right? In everything that you put out. You mentioned that you work with a co-author. What does your process look like? And it could be with an article or a speech or one of your books, but how do you extract your ideas out of your mind? How do you put them to paper? Is there a specific kind of process or system or flow that you follow that you find to be very helpful in getting your ideas out of your mind and into the world?
Well, with the Go Giver, those were all co-authored with John, but all my other books, which were how-to books, I authored myself. So there's two different processes. Now, the ones that I work with John, it's so easy because he's so great at what he does. This guy is a pure writer, like Ted Williams is a pure hitter and Bobby Orr was a pure hockey player. It's just, you know what I'm saying? So it's a joy.
What does that look like, Bob? Just for those, sorry, and my apologies for interrupting, but
not at all.
What does that look like? I mean, I think a lot of people don't necessarily feel that they themselves are writers or they could be good at writing, and having someone like your co-author, right? Having someone that you could work with can really help you to accelerate that process. You just very high level explain, what does that look like? How do the two of you get a book out there?
Well, it might be different there than if somebody was using a ghostwriter or something, because with John and I, it's our books together. So it's not like I'm giving him these ideas and he's writing a story. We're both working on it together and got brilliant ideas with the stories as well. So we just get together and we decide what is it that we want this to be about, the basic characters involved, depending upon what topic it is, depending on who has already written articles about all these things. We go back into these and we take out all the good stuff and kind of determine where it's going to go. And then John writes the chapter and we go back over it and we decipher every word and every letter and right. And it kind of gets put together that way. But I think anybody who has an idea for a book can decide on, if it's a how-to book, I would first go with the title. I would start with the title. That doesn't mean that's going to be the title, but that's where you start. A short, punchy title, Endless Referrals. That was my first one, right? Endless Referrals, short, sweet. And the benefit was right in the title. And then the subtitle is usually a little bit longer and more explanatory. Network your everyday contacts into sales, right? So title, Endless Referrals. Subtitle, network your everyday contacts into sales. Anybody going past it in the bookstore, because back then it was bookstores, it wasn't Amazon, would know that this was their book if they wanted it. Then I would actually write an introduction. I'd start with the introduction. Introduction, isn't that the boring thing we all skip through? And I remember reading in a book called How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler, where he talked about if you read through an introduction, you'll notice that somewhere in that introduction, the author will tell you why he or she wrote the book and what they want you to get out of it. So it turns out, and I started doing that every time after that. Now I love introductions because now I'm looking for exactly the premise of the book, why they wrote it, and what they want me to get out of it. Right. So I say, write the introduction first for yourself, because when you write that introduction, you're going to clarify to yourself and for yourself why you're writing that book. Okay. Then I would go through the chapters, which is really the table of contents. Right. And again, you don't worry about it being perfect. It does not have to be, not at all. Okay. Just put down the chapter ideas that you have. And then I would go back and then I'd write an introduction for each chapter, one paragraph, right? The introduction. What's the chapter about? What do you want the reader to get out of the chapter? Then go back and just write your book. Do it a little bit each day or however you do it. And pretty soon you have a book. And you can always hire an editor. You can hire a co-author to go through it, or, a ghostwriter to go through it, or whatever you want to do. There's all sorts of resources.
So Bobby, you mentioned the word perfect, and it does not have to be perfect. How do you feel about your books? I mean, do you feel that your books, they're perfect, or do you still publish even when you feel like, yeah, this is 80% or 90% there? Like, I wonder, how far do you push it where at some point it just doesn't make sense to continue to refine and improve it because it'll just take too much time and it may never get out there?
Sure. Oh, there's always a point of diminishing returns when any additional work you do is not nearly the return that you would have by actually shipping and getting it out there.
Yeah. Is there any specific way that you think about that, or it's just more a sense that you have based on where you're at with the book?
Yeah, it's just a sense. When I've gotten to the point that I just feel like anything else I'm going to do is going to have such a minimal.
All right. So a few more questions before we wrap up here. You wrote the book, Endless Referrals. Right now, given where we are with everything going on in the world, what would you suggest for those who do want to create endless referrals, to have more referral business coming in more predictably? What would be a couple of suggestions in terms of steps or actions or mindsets that they could adopt or start to implement?
Well, when you have a client who really feels great about you, right? They know you, they like you, they trust you, right? That's the client who's most likely to refer you to others. So what I would do is, and I created what I call a bridge statement, because a bridge in the physical world is a structure that transports you from one safe piece of land to another. Well, the bridge statement or bridge phrase is a phrase that does the same thing. It takes you from that where you are now, where that person knows, likes, and trusts you, to another safe piece of land where that person and you both feel very comfortable with the referral process. So it sounds something like this. Dave, as more and more of my businesses now through referrals and introductions, I find it helpful to partner with my clients such as you. Can we take a few quick minutes and run past the names of some other people I might also be able to help? Now, your wording will be a little different depending upon your style. And by the way, if right now your business isn't really referral based and you don't feel comfortable saying as more and more of my businesses through, you might just say, Dave, as I'm in the process of expanding my referral business, I find it's helpful to partner. Okay. But eventually it will be referral based. And then you can easily say, as more and more of my business now through referrals and introductions. So what that statement does is it helps the other person to feel very, very comfortable with the process. Again, as more and more of my businesses now through referrals and introductions, I find it helpful to partner. Partner is a very key word with my clients and friends such as you. And then this next part of the phrase is very important. Can we take a few quick minutes and run past the names of some other people, or you might say of one or two or a few people, however you want to do it, because that's what I call fast language. Can we take a few quick minutes and run past, right, the names? So in other words, you're letting them know, this busy person know it's not going to take up a lot of their time. And then some other people I might also be able to help. The reason I say might is because I always want to communicate that there's an out or back door, both for them and for anyone they refer me to. So they never have to worry about myself or any of my team coming on inappropriately and trying to hard set. You know what I'm saying? So we always want to give that out or back door.
And do you find the best practice to be that you would present some potential people that they could introduce you to, or is a more effective process asking some questions to help to identify people that they might know that you could help, but you don't know who they are yet?
Right. So there's two ways to do this. So let's say, for example, they say, yeah, that would be fine. And so you've got their buy-in to that. Now what you let them know is, Dave, the type of person I'm looking for it doesn't have to be someone who does exactly what you're doing, but has some of those same qualities. They're probably between 30 and 45 years old. They've got a growing business that they're feeling that they're a little stuck and maybe wanting to accelerate a little bit more. And they probably do between $2 and $6 million with 15 or 20 employees. Okay. What you've done is you've given him the kind of way to just identify who that person would be. Okay. Now, and then what you do is, and I learned this from Tom Hopkins in that very first book I got, and then we'll come back to your other question about suggesting certain people in a moment. But what Tom used to say is that where people messed up with asking for referrals is where they'd say, who do you know, or do you know anybody who? Because it's just too big a world. We know 250, 300 people. So when you say, who do you know, or do you know anybody, a collage of hundreds of people go past their mind, they can't identify. So what Tom said is to just very gently funnel down their world into small groups they can picture. So, Dave, I know you are a golfer. And he says, oh, God, yeah, I love golf. Well, he's a golfer. He got all he talks about is golf, and he's got pictures of it, right? So you say, do you play with different people or the same people? Oh, same foursome every time. Harry Brown, Michael Cloud, Dr. Mary Ruart, and I, we're out there every Sunday afternoon. Well, boom. He's just named people to say, would Harry or Michael or Dr. Mary, would any of those fit the profile of what we're talking, right? And so that's one. Now another frame, it might be all of them, none of them, one of them. No, it doesn't matter. You've set him up to be able to come up with names. So now he feels very comfortable with the process. Now maybe another frame might be his local civic club or organization, or it might be an association of people who do what he does. You can go through those depending upon what you do. Now, regarding your question about asking for specific people, sure, if there's people that you'd like to talk to and you think there might be a connection. Now, let's say, for example, you see someone on LinkedIn. You think, wow, yeah, that would be a great person I'd like to meet. Now, you kind of work backwards through their connections and you find out that Dave knows this person. And you say, so Dave, I'm wondering, do you know so-and-so, so-and-so? Or you could even say something, I know you're connected with so-and-so on LinkedIn, but that doesn't always mean we know people personally. Do you have any kind of relationship with Dan Johnson or Mary, whoever the person might be? Now, he might say, well, no, or whatever, but he might say, oh, yeah, actually, I've gotten to know them. They're really nice. Now, the way I would say it is this, because again, we never want to put someone on the spot. Would you feel comfortable with the idea of introducing me to them? And by the way, I don't want to in any way infringe upon your relationship. So if this is not something you feel comfortable doing, absolutely understandable. And the more of an out you give someone to take like that, the more they feel as though, it's not an issue, because they know you respect the process enough to not make them look bad.
That is such an important point. Bob, I know we are coming up here to time, and I want to respect that. I want to thank you. You came recently on to one of our private client masterminds. And
yeah, I enjoyed that very much.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you coming on that and having you on the podcast here today. One final quick question for you, and then I want to make sure that people can learn more about everything that you have going on. You love books, which is very clear from anyone who's watching this on YouTube and so forth, as do I. So aside from your books, which I certainly highly recommend, what are one or two books you've read in the last 6 months, could be fiction or nonfiction, that you just absolutely loved and would recommend to others?
That's such a tough question because I'm reading constantly. I would say Adam Grant's book, Think Again. I actually read that about a year ago. His book, Think Again, which really helps us to see where it's such a great idea to question our current beliefs and question whether we're right. And I think his book is really one of the most important books I've ever read in my life.
Wow. Okay.
I think that one. And I'm just trying to think of another one that I've read in the past. Well, Trust and Inspire, Stephen M.R. Covey's latest book. I just finished that one a little while ago, and I thought he did a wonderful job. It was a great follow-up to his classic, The Speed of Trust.
Right. All right. And then Bob, where should we send people? What's the one kind of URL destination that we should send people to learn more about you and your work and everything you have going on?
Yeah, as a general site, I'd say Burg, BURG.com. If people are interested in our Go-Giver online membership community, it would be the Go-Giver Community without the hyphen, thegogivercommunity.com.
All right. Well, Bob, thank you again so much for coming on. We'll have all that linked up in the show notes. I appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.